came about was that I was in San Francisco and I was scouting locations for a movie that ironically I never wound up making. But when I was down at Fisherman's Wharf, I saw a sign and it said, World War II submarine tours $2. And my eyebrows went up and I thought, that's really neat. I've always wanted to go aboard a submarine. Months later, the project I was working on had stalled out. I had never gotten a chance to go aboard that submarine, and I said to myself, I want to write a movie about something that would really interest me. And that World War II submarine just popped in my head, and I said, I got to go back there and see that. So I went back to San Francisco, and I went aboard the submarine, and I was just hooked. And I spent the whole day just standing on this submarine, trying to soak in its ambiance and trying to understand the courage of the young men who went out to sea in these things.
For years, Dino's always wanted to remake a few films that he did about World War I and World War II, and it was never the right timing. But we always loved that time period of filmmaking because war pictures are ever so emotional, dramatic, and in the face of tragedy always. So I mean, to find a good script nowadays is very difficult. To find a good story. It was, we were searching to pull from that era.
In all my life, in all my career, in the last 50 years in making movie, I always like to make epic movie. Waterloo, War and Peace, Barabba, the Bible, many, many pictures. And during the shooting of Breakdown with John Mustafa, I said to John, I want to do World War II movie. I have a different story in my mind, different kind of a movie. But John said to me, Dino, if you want to do World War II story, I have a picture about submarine. I give first draft to him. I did this first draft and I love it.
Because fortunately of the success of Breakdown, I was given the opportunity to kind of do a bigger movie next, and I presented the script and everyone said, okay, we'll back that. And then I really went to work and I got very serious about the technical details. I went out and surrounded myself with World War II submariners. I did as much research as I'd done. I went and did even more research, and my goal was really to make an old-fashioned World War II submarine movie. I remember, sometimes late at night as a kid and even as an adult, flipping around on TV and seeing a great old movie like Run Silent, Run Deep or Destination Tokyo. And I wanted to make a movie that was in that vein and that could recall some of those feelings that I had when I first watched those pictures. So when you say to me that it's an old-fashioned kind of filmmaking, that's the best compliment you can pay to me, because to me the story is the star of this movie. That was a very uncommercial idea. So I said, I'm writing a World War II movie set in the water, and nobody ever heard of me. What am I doing? I'm wasting my time. And yet I was so fascinated by the subject matter that I just felt compelled to keep writing. And for me, the coming up with the story, that was fun, and working at all the action beats, that was fun. But for me, the big challenge was I couldn't get my sort of hands around the idea of who are these people that had the courage to go do this thing? Atlantic was an extraordinary time. It was, very few people realize this, but in the first part of 1942, really from the very end of January through to basically late in the summer, we were getting our butts kicked right off the eastern seaboard of the United States. The government kept it pretty quiet, and anecdotally people knew that U-boats, which are the German submarines, were coming very close to shore, but people didn't realize how much of a toll they were taking. And what people don't even know to this day is that a quarter of all the ships sunk in the Battle of the Atlantic were sunk right off the eastern seaboard of the United States.
The Germans were about to take over the world, and it would have ruined American life the way they knew it. So it was a very serious thing to serve your country and to fight for the things that we had in America.
Well, we felt a responsibility as actors making this movie. It was an honor to play these characters, but also, we wanted to get it right. We wanted to, because the movie, even though it's a work of fiction, it symbolizes and represents what these guys went through.
We weren't playing specific people that had lived, but we were playing characters that, you know, had survived in that time and had acted and done the jobs that we did in that time. And you do feel a responsibility to portray them correctly because they were heroes.
It's a real sort of heroism. It's not flag-waving heroism, although there's patriotism and all those elements of fighting for a good cause. But it's really about people in really dire circumstances, overcoming those circumstances.
Too much, and Jonathan didn't do that as well. So it's very nice that he just told the story the real way. And how, you know, like I said, when the stakes are life and death, can you be too intense? No. Can you be too scared? No. You know, it's all those stakes give you the leverage and the license and the clarification. I know for me as an actor, and I think it worked.
Me to do that. Under what circumstances would I or my friends be able to do that? And would I be able to do it? For myself, I don't know. I really don't know. I'd like to think that I would, but, you know, that's the thing about history. It's only those people in those moments will ever really know. But I must say, when you meet those people, the generation of men and women that fought World War II and won World War II for the free world, that generation, they built our country. They built a lot of other countries too. The purpose of this movie, we were not able to get any World War II submarines because the few that are left are not seaworthy enough. So we constructed from scratch in a shipyard a 600-ton, full-sized, seaworthy vessel, diesel-powered, that we went out to sea with, and we filmed our sea battles in the ocean with this full-sized submarine replica.
Discovering that the predecessors of the submarines that won World War II for the Americans were boats that were designed in 1917 and were called the S-boat series, or R-boat, S-boats, and a number of earlier submarines that were based on Holland Lake designs, which ironically enough is what the 7th Sea for the Germans was based on, but a very new version designed and built in the 30s. So similar in size, similar in proportion and design, but the German machine being a much more sophisticated piece of equipment.
What you see there is less a piece of art, it's a piece of work. It is enormous work to have all the research of the old submarines from the S-33, which is here behind me, the bluer one. There was really nothing left. It is just some old, very blurry pictures, photographs, which are also different from each other. So we are very free. But on the other side, from the other one, the German one, there are very precise, even drawings of that time available, even if there's none of the real ones left over on the world.
In construction, of course, we have all of the basic crafts, and from carpenters to, in this case, a lot of blacksmiths, as they call them here in Europe, which are metal workers, welders, and shapers of metal. You know, it's large sculpture is what it is. And then, of course, painters, and then mold makers, master mold makers. A lot of the set pieces that you see behind me and over to my right that make up the submarine are of all materials, everything from fiberglass to metal to wood to Bondo, all kinds of stuff.
So our job was to recreate as authentically as we could the German submarines, the American submarines, the weapons, the props, all these things, and it's a very difficult job, but it's in some ways easier to recreate than to completely synthesize from scratch.
It was easy to be very creative in the framework of these uniforms. We just tried to make it as authentic as possible. In fact, it's so authentic that Dino came to me one day and he said, "They don't look German." And I said, "But Dino, that really is the way that the submarine service looked." And I think he had in mind much more that terrible SS military look. I've never had to make as many clothes and it was fun to do.
We're doing things in this movie that have never been done before. In Rome, we shot on the largest soundstage in Europe, and we constructed the most immense gimbal that's ever been created for motion picture.
And they set the submarine on top of the gimbal, and it would raise and lower and shake so they could create the effect. It also, on one end of it, it had these huge water tanks that would spill water into the submarine so that when they were shooting, they could really create the experience that the actual submarines were going through. And for us, what was great for us was that it felt so real.
This is one of the biggest open water tanks in the world, and they have constructed 2 100-foot rain towers, and I've been told these are the biggest rain towers ever done for a movie, motion picture. I've been in some big effects pictures like Twister, but I've never seen rain towers like this.
It's not really too hard to get in character on these sets because the sub is amazing. It's what, 400 tons of steel that they've constructed, 2 of them, and shooting out there in the ocean. And the rain, and it really allows you to really be there and get into it, and they've done an amazing job.
One thing that unifies the whole cast in this movie is they're all actors who, in my opinion, are able to imagine themselves in these kind of circumstances. And that's very important when you're doing a picture like this where it's so technical, and one day I'm putting an actor out at the ocean, I'm saying, okay, you're in the middle of a sea battle now, you can't see the shells that are landing 3 feet from you, but you got to imagine that they're there. And there's certain kind of actors that understand how to take that and make it real for the audience. My feeling is if you do stuff for real, it looks real, and it has a certain quality. It not only helps the visual quality on film, but it also helps the performances, because the less that the actors have to manufacture in their own heads about what's going on, the more stimuli that you can give them on the set, the better performance I think you get as well. And ultimately it just adds up to a more visceral experience for the audience. My goal in making this movie was to create an authentic World War II submarine experience for the audience. I don't want the audience just to go watch this movie, I want them to experience it. And it's very challenging because the physical elements are so difficult, and you have to achieve authenticity. There's so many people out there that'll write you the letter of, the X widget was improperly connected to the Y widget, this movie is outrageous, and submarine buffs and history buffs. So we knew that we had to achieve a level of accuracy that was unassailable by people who'd be seeing the movie.
The Enigma came to be in the German Navy after World War I, when a German code book during the war had been captured by the Russians, who gave it to the British, who used it to, in effect, bottle up the German Navy in the North Sea so that they couldn't come out and win the war in an afternoon with a battle. So as a consequence of the revelations that the British were able to do this, the Germans created a new machine called the Enigma, the purpose of which was, even if being captured, you wouldn't be able to solve messages in that. However, if it were captured, it would often, in very many cases, help the Allies solve messages enciphered in it. There was a considerable difference between the old-fashioned code books, which were like dictionaries, and the Enigma machine. With the old code books, this was like reconstructing a language, and the guys you needed to do this work were mainly classical scholars, guys who knew Latin, Greek, Egyptian, things like that. Whereas with the new systems, these were primarily mathematical, and you needed mathematicians. The old systems used books, and you needed language experts. With these, you needed mathematicians who knew statistics and matters like that, and that was basically the difference between the older systems of World War I and the newer systems of World War II. The Enigma machine had as its heart a wired rotor. Imagine a hockey puck. 26 electrical contacts on one side, 26 on the other. These are wired at random, one to another. You shoot an electrical current in at A, it comes out at X. The rotor turns one place, A again. This time it's Q. Well, that would be kind of a simple system with only 26 different possibilities. If, however, you lined up 3 rotors, one after another, so that when one completed a revolution, the other one turned. You had a much more complicated cipher, and that basically is the way the Enigma cipher machine worked. One Enigma to put the messages into code, and another Enigma at the other end to take the messages out of code. So it was always a two-way device. Unlike the Air Force Enigma, which had its rotors set at the whim of the Air Force men who were radioing the messages, and these guys would use dirty words, girlfriends' names, and all of that, the Naval Enigma was set up on a random basis according to rules set down by the Navy. So particular messages had to set up in a particular way, and these were always random settings of the code wheel. This made it much more difficult to break, and it wasn't possible to crack that without capturing some documents either from U-boats or from other ships that were attacked by the Royal Navy and captured. Came to the surface. They had survived and were floating in the water. They had been told, one of them, to take the Enigma rotors out of the machine in case the machine had been salvaged and drop them overboard. But he forgot to do it. And when these men were captured, this man still had the Enigma rotors in his pocket. And when the British came over to them to find out what was going on, he said, "Oh my God, I forgot to do it." And he went over to his pants and squeezed the pants to see if the Enigma rotors had been taken out. The pants were empty. The British had taken these Enigma rotors, and that was kind of the first break that the British had into the naval Enigma rotor machine.
These men.
Times of solution are 48 hours, 72 hours, 84 hours, incredible lengths of time. The minute one of these messages are solved, after these new code books came into effect, the solution time drops to 4 hours. So they were reading them almost as quickly as the Germans themselves. The solutions of the Enigma greatly facilitated the Allied prosecution of the war. It enabled the Allies to more effectively divert their convoys around the wolf packs. It enabled later in the war for the Allies to attack the submarines. But it can't be said, as some writers say, that code breaking won the war. That can't be true. The war at sea was won by the guys who were sailing the ships, the guys who were fighting the U-boats, the shipyard makers in the United States who were building more ships than the Germans could ever sink. These were the guys who won the war. But code breaking did help. What code breaking did do was shorten the war and save lives. So there were very many people who are alive today who might not have been alive but for code breaking.
Tus trailers, visita mi canal.